helping us transition the two pieces together. Now let's move on to the inside of the leg. So we have the jaguar up top on the inside of the thigh, and then we have some more foliage and some more smoke. So I put the smoke right over the knee, right here, because one, if anyone's gotten their knee tattooed, it doesn't feel good. The knee sucks. You also, if you can help it, you don't want to really put like a rock solid image on the knee. The knee's prone to fading. Some people's knees have a lot of dips and stuff like that. And so if you can, I like to put something that's a little bit more fluid over the knee. Normally that means we're not doing as much heavy shading on the knee, so there's a little bit of relief there for the client. But then you don't really have to worry about the image looking warped when you bend your knee, or just from the natural contours of a specific person's knee. And smoke moves around, you know, it moves however you want. So it's never gonna look out of place or anything like that, because ultimately you can't. So let's go ahead and talk about the upper portion of this leg. So we have the jaguar up here. Now the shading on the jaguar is actually pretty light. When working the contrast, I chose to intentionally make it kind of light. Everything that has to be there is there, with the emphasis on the spots and the deep blacks, but then some of the other tones is almost just skin. And part of the reason for that is the more time, and part of the reason for that is that the more that I do this over the years, I'm really starting to learn that when it comes to this style of tattooing, using the contrast between the dark tones and shading and just open skin, in my opinion, is what's gonna make that tattoo hold up well and look good for the rest of that person's life. Because as always, what's the point of going through the pain and time and money and getting tattooed just for your tattoo to look kind of mushy and illegible 5-6 years down the road? We'll give it even a little bit more time, maybe even 10 years. But what I think, if a person can accomplish that contrast with just the open skin and the darks, that's what's going to keep that tattoo legible and just looking good for like the many years to come. So we framed the image in with some shading up here, and then again working the contrast with the foliage right here, which has been a common theme throughout the tattoo, is the foliage. This foliage in particular, again, the shading's pretty light. It's almost just kind of taking the shape of the leaves. The leaves are not the main focus of the tattoo. I wasn't trying to make them super prominent. We just needed them in there. The jaguar is the main focus, so that's what needs to be, you know, nice and strong in there. There is a little bit of redness right here, ingrown hairs. Sometimes that happens, just, you know, the shaving of the leg. So sometimes that just happens. We got some nice dark shading right here, and that's emphasizing the little wispies of the fur at the bottom of the chin at the bottom of the jaw chin of the jaguar. We got the arm over here, like it's kind of like leaping forward a little bit. It's leaping forward out of the foliage, so we got some more foliage down here. And again, the foliage works for more than just like a uniform look throughout the leg. It also, again, you know, down here, we're using it as a transition with the gorilla. So the jaguar is jumping out of the foliage. The foliage is uniform. It makes the image look a little bit more full, but it's also, it creates some uniformity throughout the leg. But then it works well with the gorilla, because I'm sure gorillas are hanging out in plenty of areas full of foliage. So it's a good natural choice to kind of fill some of the gaps. So let's go ahead and break down this gorilla piece. You have this roaring gorilla. Again, working with the contrast. We have the deep, heavy blacks around it, framing the image. These deep blacks fade as we move upwards. So it's heavy black here. We move on into the smoke. We keep the shading tones nice and light in the foliage right here, using the heavy black behind it to kind of frame and hold the image together. And then before we get into the deep blacks on the jaguar, like right here in this location, we lighten up the tones before we get there. And part of that has to do with the way I was taught to tattoo. I was told that you want to do checkerboard style shading, to think of it like a checkerboard. And what does that mean? So, okay, so when you have a checkerboard, it's like black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white. What happens if you have black right next to black? They're gonna get lost, it's gonna get buried. And not only that, that checkerboard, you're gonna clearly be able to tell that that's the screwed up part of the checkerboard. Same thing with tattoos, because if you were to do, for example, if we were to keep this heavy black behind it and then start to do the heavy black down here below, what happens? That background runs into the piece that we have above it. It runs into the shading in the jaguar. It doesn't create the separation. So we have that checkerboard. Look at this. Nice, clear and open, lighter tones, skin, moving into heavy black. Right before we get into the heavy black right here on the jaguar, the tones lighten up to almost just bare skin right there before we move into the deep black. So that's something you just kind of want to be aware of. I see some artists who, you know, maybe didn't get that memo during their apprenticeship, and I see them kind of do that black on black shading, and sometimes the image calls for it and you can get away with it. Even then, I still like to take a little bit of artistic liberty and kind of create that gap, because what I'm doing is I'm thinking about the future of the tattoo, how that image translates into a tattoo. The ink in the skin is going to like kind of spread and expand a little bit over time as the years go on. And so I think if you can take steps while you're doing that tattoo to help with, again, legibility is like kind of almost my biggest thing. And legibility is like the tattoo looking good and being like extremely readable, and everything that you did in the tattoo is also going to be there. You know, what's the point of using some super light tone that you could maybe, you could see it there for 2-3 years, but then after that it just burns out in the sun and you can't see it. So that piece is now gone, and that hinders like legibility. So when I use that term, I'm really trying to say like the overall appearance of the tattoo. I guess that's a good way of putting it. I want a nice, good, crisp, clean overall appearance for the tattoo. That's how I like to do them. I don't like doing my stuff mushy. Some guys kind of do mushy tattoos. I prefer crisp and sharpened if I could do it. I think it holds up better. Okay, let's talk about the gorilla again, because I know I kind of deviated off the gorilla. So we have this gorilla here with some attitude. You know, he's like banging his chest or something like that. You know, he's mad. He's mad. You know, you see his teeth. You see his tongue. You know, he's mad. He is roaring. Why is he mad? Maybe he's mad that these other predators are encroaching on his territory and he's about to fight with them. I don't know. It looks cool though. You could see some of the more like deep black defining stuff that I did here. So we got some deep black inside of the mouth. And again, I took a little bit of liberty right here with the tongue. Because here's the other thing too, seeing these images in color, you can fully kind of see the tongue. You could see the inside of the mouth. It's different colors and tones and teeth. But when translating that over into a black and gray image, Sure, maybe I could have took some heavy black and just shaded this whole thing out 100%. You run a little bit of a risk doing that. One, we already have a lot of deep black going on in this image, and adding more deep black, you're just like, now we're approaching that, like maybe it gets muddy territory. So we got a little bit deep here, and I still go darker because this is the further part in the mouth with the tongue. It goes further back. And I also wanted to use the deep tones with, again, bouncing the contrast off the teeth. The teeth here have very minimal shading. This is very light tone, and then just skin. The front ones right up here don't even have any shading in here. I went darker, checkerboard, remember. I went darker up top right here, so that's darker, deeper tones, and then we move into just skin, and then again we're getting into the darker tones. So skin, dark, and then a little bit deeper because again the tongue is retracted in the mouth, and I wanted to use the deeper tones for the teeth. But then I went a little bit lighter overall on the tongue to avoid like just having things be, you know, super dark. Now we all know gorillas, their fur is black. I didn't want to just stick with like with straight, you know, black with the shading. You know, we're gonna achieve the look of the gorilla utilizing different tones. Like I was saying, we got deep black here. Now imagine that. Imagine this is where the things get, how things could get lost. You have deep black in the background, and then there's portions of the gorilla that have deep black. But if we would have just used, you know, heavy black throughout this entire tattoo, you would lose a lot of the definition and highlights. And not only that, if you're lucky enough to not make this thing get lost with the background and you can still kind of see it, at that point, you're just hoping it will hold up halfway kind of decent and maybe not look super muddy and lost right away. So you have to work with lighter tones and open skin to balance out the heavy black that you have in the background. So while a lot of this is a diluted tone of my black, it's not all just, you know, straight 100% deep black. Which is why that gorilla now stands out. The images stand out, you can see them. You can see them bouncing off of the background. And that's ultimately the goal. Part of going heavy black in the back is to bring images forward. And you got to control your tones too when you're doing that, because if you have a lot of heavy deep black in your image up front and you're doing it in the background as well, the whole depiction of the perspective, you're going to warp that. You're going to mess that up. You're going to bring them kind of like that perspective wise, and background might not look like background. That is the breakdown of this leg sleeve. I'm sure I could have gotten even more in depth, you know, with such a large piece, kind of breaking things down, but this isn't some online tattoo school digital apprenticeship sort of thing. I'm merely just kind of explaining my thought process and, you know, some of the things that I did with this leg sleeve, just to kind of help you guys get a little bit more insight into, like, you know, what's going on in my brain. Why did I do things? Why are certain things done a certain way? So with that said, thank you for watching this episode. I hope you guys like it enough to catch the next one. And shoot, man, you guys have a good day. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And see ya.